Hi, I'm Bart Hanson. I'm the owner and lead instructor for CrushLivePoker.com. The following hand comes from our call-in show that we record live at 2 p.m. Eastern Time every Monday. If you enjoy this video, hit that like button, and if you want to submit to be on the show, take a look at the information in the description. They had a problem with you leaving because you were up?
Yeah, they claimed I was supposed to play for 3 or 4 hours. I played for 2 hours, and I felt like that was plenty. And it's part of the strategy is what my question to you is, isn't that part of the strategy of playing? It's like Kenny Rogers says, know when to walk away, know when to run.
Well, here's the thing. So there's a couple things going on here, and like I said, I want to address this, so I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to edit this for YouTube. This is about hit and running and things like this. Number one, if you're in a public casino, which I realize this is certainly not the case with you, here's my feelings on hitting and running. If you're in a public casino, obviously you can do whatever you want. People can come and go. Now, if you're in a quasi-private game, even in a public casino, it's sort of similar to kind of a home game. It's similar to a home game that's maybe in somebody's home because you're invited to the game. And that goes on here a lot in Texas here too. Like actually when the Texas card rooms opened up, a lot of home games actually got moved into the card rooms just because it was easier for the home games to be in there. And they don't necessarily get the rake, but that wasn't about the rake. They were just trying to play, and it's easier because the places supply dealers. So there's always sort of set rules that like a private game can have. Because I don't play in a lot of private games or just never really got into that scene, I've never had to deal with sort of calling my time. A few of these games I've been into, at least in Texas, some large Big O games where it's sort of assumed that you're going to kind of call time. I wouldn't just walk away, necessarily. But no, there isn't really strategy in hitting and running or leaving if the game is good. The only time, from a fundamental tactical perspective, the only time that I would leave because I was up a lot is if I had some sort of aggressive player on my left that was giving me fits. Usually when the game is good, I'm going to stay. But I think where we're going with this is like, is it bad to like hit and run? Here's the thing. First of all, if you're a recreational player, I do think that you probably can do whatever you want. If you're a quote-unquote for-profit player, the more we get into poker, the more we realize, especially nowadays, where poker is becoming more and more computerized. And what I mean by that is that people have access to a lot of material that's going to actually make them good players because somebody else has boiled down the material for them. So even an idiot can become a good player if they actually put their mind to it. As poker gets tougher, you start to realize that poker, there's more to it, more to actually making money from poker than just actually the skill level. And these are some of the skill level what you come. So these are some of the nuanced things that you have to think about as a for-profit player. If you're a for-profit player and people are going to be upset if you leave early or if you agreed to play for a certain amount of time and you didn't play for that time, in their eyes, you hit and ran. Yeah, that's a bad situation for you. It's something that I wouldn't do. It's not really against the rules. It's just the perception from the other players. I want to appease the other players so that I can get invited back into the game. If you're going to leave early, or if you hit and run, and that's going to basically be a bad perception on you, then I wouldn't recommend doing it. I would recommend, appeasing the players. If you're a losing player, if you're a recreational player, you can do whatever you want. And from the flip side too, obviously I don't personally, as a for-profit player, you shouldn't care if somebody hit and runs you. So as a for-profit player, we have to appease the recreational players and sort of follow their rules about hitting and running and staying for a minimum amount of time. But when it's turned around, you shouldn't care. I'm not saying you, caller. I'm saying like a for-profit player shouldn't care if a losing player comes in and hits and runs. Like certainly shouldn't care. So it's kind of it sort of flows into this whole thing, that I was kind of talking about over the last few weeks about how I don't get too upset when people try to angle me because sometimes it's the only way that they can win, or they think that somehow, it's a part of the game or something like that. Where the person that's doing it, it really depends on who is doing it. Like every single poker situation is basically situational. So that's
Right.
why I used to get into this big debate with with this guy that's no longer on CLP. He was a troublemaker about, is going north cheating or is it breaking the rules? Going north, of course, is like adding on to your stack beyond what the cap in the game is.
Mm.
And it would always like denigrate down to this argument that, well, if you're doing something against the rules, you're cheating. It's against the rules, you're cheating. And I'd be like, that's just not the way that you can look at things. You can't look at these situations black and white, because if you're going to say that you're doing something against the rules and you're cheating, which then means you're a cheater, which is the worst thing that you possibly could be in gambling, then does that mean that you're a cheater if you get up because you have to take a piss and it's not your turn? You're not next to act and you get up out of turn. Well, you've acted out of turn. That's against the rules, right? So you're cheating, right? So you're a cheater. So every single thing is nuanced. Nothing's black and white. So you have to look at these different situations where they're kind of nuanced. I can't necessarily give you opinion about whether you necessarily hit and run,
Right.
but what I would say is,
My position, not to cut you off, but my position was I've known these guys. I've given lots of action. I've put lots in the game. I've followed the rules. There was no set thing. They claimed 3 or 4 hours. I guess that's just in their mind because I went back and checked the telegram, all the communications about the game, and there was no indication of a certain amount of time like, they're grabbing onto. And
yeah,
to be quite honest, I played for 2 hours plus, and I came up to 1600 and went back down and came up, and then got in this hand with a set of nines against aces, and 2700, and I'm like, that's enough. I'm 55
I mean,
years
like
old.
I said, I don't think. I mean, obviously, you can do whatever you want, right? I don't think it's necessarily a part of the strategy, though, to unless you have some sort of mental game thing where you're like, well, I tend to, and this has happened to me before in my career. When I win, I start to play spewy, so I want to end my session.
Yeah,
That
my
happened to me in the
EV
beginning.
definitely probably goes up 10 points.
Right, right.
You know,
So, like I said, it's all sort of managing this type of stuff. I mean, I don't think you did anything wrong, especially if it wasn't explicitly stated that you had to play for X amount of time and it was just sort of assumed and you put in like 2 or 3 hours. I don't see how that's really hit and running. But here's the thing, Brian. And again, this is the whole thing with my argument with slow rolling. It doesn't really matter whether you were hit and running or not. Just like it doesn't really matter if, just like when someone says, "Oh, that guy slow rolled," it doesn't really matter if they were actually slow rolling or not. It's what is perceived, what was in their perception. So in your case, if they perceived you to be hitting and running, then that's bad. If with the slow rolling, like if the person that turned their cards over in a slow way, if they're not trying to slow roll, then it's not a slow roll. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think we have to look at these situations in how is it actually perceived. The perception of it is more important than what actually went on, basically.
well, and this is the problem for me now. I don't have a game because these guys, cashed me out and said, well, if you're going to do that, and it's the only time it's ever happened in the amount of time that I've played with them.
Yeah. So this
it
guy,
seems to me like they're scared I'm going to do it again, and they're not going to get their money back.
well, I mean, you can tell them that you won't. You can just have a discussion with them. This guy Walker Gibson says if it's a profitable game that you enjoy playing in, apologize and say you won't bail out early again. Put your ego aside and make your money. I mean, that's pretty. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
But I appreciate the call, Brian. I got to move along. Thank you
Sure.
very much.
All right, thanks.
If you like what you've seen here, please hit the subscribe button. And if you enjoyed this call in hand, hit the like button down below. To check out crushlivepoker.com, click on the link in the description. Use the code YTA300 to get the first 30 days for free.